Margaret Whitmore had always been the perfect wife. She stood by her husband, Charles, through thick and thin, raising their children and maintaining the illusion of a flawless marriage. But deep inside, she longed for something more, something that made her heart race and her soul come alive. That something arrived in the form of James Caldwell, an artist with piercing blue eyes and a quiet intensity that drew her in. She met him at a local gallery, a place she rarely visited but had been encouraged to explore by a friend. The moment their eyes met, an unspoken connection formed between them, a silent understanding of longing and loneliness. At first, Margaret resisted. She reminded herself of her vows, her responsibilities. But as the days passed, she found herself drawn to the small coffee shop near the gallery, where James often sketched. Conversations turned into lingering touches, stolen moments filled with an intensity neither of them could ignore. "I know this is wrong," Margaret whispered one evening as they sat in his dimly lit studio. "But I can't help the way I feel." James took her hand in his. "Sometimes, the right things don't come in the right circumstances." And so, their affair began. They met in secrecy, their passion burning in the quiet corners of the world, away from prying eyes. James showed Margaret a kind of love she had never known. Raw, consuming, exhilarating. He painted her, capturing the hidden sadness in her eyes and the yearning in her smile. But secrets have a way of unraveling. Charles, ever the pragmatic and calculating businessman, noticed the changes in his wife. The late nights. The distant gaze. The way she flinched when he touched her. One evening, Charles followed her. He watched as she slipped into James's studio, her fingers trembling as she reached for the door. Rage and betrayal surged through him. He didn't storm in, didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, he planned. Margaret, unaware of his knowledge, continued to dream of a life with James. She thought of leaving, of finally choosing happiness over obligation. Then came the night of the gala. Margaret arrived with Charles, forced smiles masking the storm brewing beneath the surface. She spotted James across the room, a silent promise in his eyes. But then, Charles made his move. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, raising his glass. "To my dear wife, who has not only been the pillar of our home but has also found herself a new companion." Gasps filled the room. Margaret's face drained of color. And then, a woman stepped forward, someone Margaret had never seen before. "James isn't who you think he is," the woman said, her voice shaking. "He did the same to me. He promised me love, told me I was the only one. But he's a liar. He preys on married women. You're just another name on his list." Margaret turned to James, searching for denial in his eyes. But there was none. Only guilt. Heartbreak consumed Margaret. She had risked everything for a man who had never truly loved her. Charles, though vengeful, was also wounded. "You were my wife," he said quietly that night. "And you threw it away for a fantasy." James tried to reach her, but it was too late. She had seen the truth. Margaret left that night. Not with James. Not with Charles. But alone. She needed to find herself again, to mend the pieces of a heart that had been shattered twice over. Love, she realized, wasn't always what it seemed. And some dreams, no matter how beautiful, are meant to remain forbidden.